welcome to the Lemonade Car Show, brought to you by Omvic and Crown. I'm your host, Lorraine Sommerfeld. I'm joined today by Terry O'Keefe. He's Director of Communications for Omvic. And John Raymond, he's a consultant with the APA. Welcome back to the show, gentlemen. It's nice to see you both.
Good to see you.
Great to be back.
Terry, Omvic, busy since we last spoke. There's a lot going on. A couple things I want to get to, but first off, 2017 was a crazy year for Omvic, and you were exercising a lot of corporate muscle. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about it.
Well, as the regulator of vehicle sales, Omvic's job is to administer and enforce the Motor Vehicle Dealers Act. And that requires dealers to conduct business with honesty and integrity and in accordance with the law, and do things like remove liens from trade-ins. And unfortunately, we had a situation with 3 different dealers in the province, used car dealers, and in 2 of those instances, they were not removing liens from trade-ins. And so there was hundreds of thousands of dollars of consumer harm. So Omvic, as you said, had to exercise its muscle to actually issue immediate suspensions. So we closed those dealerships down. At the same time, we issued proposals to revoke their registration. And ultimately, 2 of the 3 had their licenses revoked, and the other one is actually having a hearing next week.
And what's important for consumers to know about this is because those were Omvic licensed dealerships, those consumers were protected and can come and get money back that they were compromised and that they lost.
Or assistance.
And assistance, whereas anyone who bought a car just from somebody who wasn't under your auspices or umbrella is out of luck.
That's an excellent point. It's unfortunate that this happened. It really is. This shouldn't happen. So it's unfortunate this happened. And these consumers obviously were out a lot of money, hundreds of thousands of dollars. But you're right, because these were actual registered dealers, the consumers have been able to come to Omvic and file claims with our compensation fund, which has already in 2017 paid out nearly $500,000 to consumers just from those 2 or 3 dealerships. And you're right, so if you bought a car privately and there was a lien on it and it got repossessed, and that does happen, that consumer unfortunately is on their own. The only recourse they would have is to try and find the person who sold them the car and sue them.
We obviously at the APA, we welcome the activities of Omvic and the teeth that they've shown in this matter, because consumers were actively harmed by these dealerships in question. This is a serious problem that costs these consumers thousands of dollars, if not more, and a lot of mental anguish to, right a wrong ship in terms of their credit.
And I think a lot of people, we get so many calls and at the APA, and I know you do as well, where people are saying, okay, I found this car on Kijiji or something, or I've looked for, and great price, this is what I want to do. And we're always saying, go to a licensed Omvic, go to a dealer, stay away from that. And that's why, because this stuff can happen and you have no recourse unless somebody is licensed by Omvic. And every salesperson, every dealership, they have these certificates, they have them in their wallet, they have them on the wall, the stickers on the door. So this is real. It's the same with the Used Car Association. These are legitimate associations. You should look for those affiliations before you buy a vehicle.
Yeah, and Omvic is more than an association. As the regulator, it's the law. Dealers and salespeople have to be registered with us, not members. They're registered, because that includes, we do criminal background checks. If it's a dealership, there's business plans that have to be evaluated. They must have a premises. They must have signage. As you said, they have to have those licenses. And the other thing that consumers should know is, and you're right, they have to have the certificates, and you can ask to see them. You want to make sure that dealer or salesperson is licensed, ask to see their Omvic license. By law, they have to show it to you. But Omvic also has to make information available to the public about every one of those registrants, every dealer, every salesperson. If they've ever been charged, that information is available on our website. If they've been convicted, it's there. If they've been disciplined for breaching the code of ethics, it's there. You can go to our website and look up the dealership that you're thinking about doing business with.
I have to admit, that's the most fun part of your website for me, is going in and it's like this litany of bad behavior.
But there's so much good information on that website.
I said it was the most fun part. I didn't say it was the most informative.
We're a clearinghouse of information. We send consumers and our members to the Omvic site because there's actionable items that will make their buying experience not only safer but more delightful.
And I think what's good for consumers to remember is Omvic, the APA, there's a lot of organizations that do work together. You guys work in conjunction with each other. You send people back and forth. You often see the same names coming up because people will be, calling everywhere trying to get help. But it's really important to know, I think, that you do have recourse. But start, I tell people this, before you buy the car, go to the Omvic site, call APA, check before you sign a contract or put any money down. Once you get home and then you look, it could be too late if you've already signed that contract. And again, no cooling off period, which everybody thinks there is one with a car purchase. But your site will tell you if that person you just dealt with, it'll pop up if they've been reported or you've investigated.
You're absolutely right. People spend so much time researching the car they want to buy, and they spend no time researching who they're going to buy it from, and or what their rights are when they go through that process. And so it's really important that they do that, because an educated consumer is a protected consumer, and that is going to make that buying process so much more enjoyable.
We're going to talk some more about this in a minute. We'll be back after this break. Lemonade Car Show. Welcome back to the Lemonade Car Show, brought to you by Omvic and Crown. I'm your host, Lorraine Sommerfeld. I'm joined by Terry O'Keefe. He's the Director of Communications with Omvic, and John Raymond, Industry Consultant with the APA. I'd like to talk a little bit about something that's been in a lot of headlines lately, and I think part of it spurs from incredibly long payment plans, usually
Called
on cars.
Negative equity.
8 years, 9 years, which leads to, jump the gun, go ahead, John.
Negative equity.
Okay.
It's been a real bugaboo for the APA. We've tried to educate our members and non-members that called us. We're very happy that Omvic has really taken a stand on this, and we'd like to turn it over to you, Terry, because I think you've spearheaded this.
I'm just going to tell viewers what it is in case somebody isn't familiar. Some people still save up and then buy a car, but most of us still take out a car loan. And then after 3 years or so, you go in and go, I really want that other car, or the dealership calls you in and says you need to buy another car. The problem is that difference you haven't paid out yet, frequently they'll roll into a new loan. And that's where the negative equity hits, where you're paying a lot more than this new car is worth because you're still paying off the old car. So now you can take it away, Terry.
Yeah, so negative equity is you owe more for your car than it's worth. So you're right. You go to trade in that car that you bought 3 years ago for $30,000. You took out an 8-year loan on it. So you haven't even come close to paying off a half of it yet, but it's depreciated so much. Maybe you're a commuter. It's depreciated so much that $30,000 car is now only worth 8 or 9 wholesale. So when you trade it in on the new car, you're going to get 8 or 9, but you still owe 17 or 18. So they're going to take that $10,000 difference and add it to the car loan for your new car. So that new car you bought that was $30,000, now you get a $40,000 loan for it. And so this type of thing snowballs, and so consumers end up with bigger and bigger and bigger car loans for cars that aren't worth anywhere near that amount.
When we talk about education for consumers, John, you mentioned it, you have, as soon as they're saying to you, don't worry about that. Like if you say, oh, but I know I'm overextended on this, the second you get told, that's not a problem, it's a problem. You owe more than this car is worth. Don't let them massage you into just buying a car by the month. And we've had this discussion amongst ourselves so many times. People buy a car by the month instead of the price of the car. And you walk into a dealership, the very first question you're going to hear is, how much do you have a month to spend? I say don't tell them. Say I have $30,000 to spend on a car all in, including taxes and stuff. But monthly thing.
That's good advice. Shop for a car, not a payment.
Yeah, and that monthly one is where you get.
Understand what you could afford. Also understand in a normal car loan, okay, it's normal to what we call in the industry being upside down at the first initial period of a loan. But what Terry's talking about, long-term loans, usually at excessive interest rates, where you're covering past sins on your previous vehicle, so you're never getting out of a position where you have some economic stability. And usually the people that have these loans are the people that have the most damaged credit histories. So it makes a huge difference.
This wasn't as much of an issue when loans were typically 4 or 5 years. That used to be a normal thing. It's with this 8 and 9 year loan period that we've seen this creep up.
Yeah, it's actually moved from people with poor credit to the majority of us. When we talk to dealers, and this is anecdotal, but when we talk to dealers, they tell us between 40 and 70% of consumers who have a trade-in are upside down or have negative equity in that trade-in. It is a huge, huge amount. So consumers really need to ask themselves some questions before they agree to a 96-month loan. How much do I drive a year? You know, if I'm putting 30 or 40,000 kilometers a year on a vehicle and I've got an 8-year loan for it, is it reliably going to last the term of that loan? How long do I normally keep cars? If I'm the type of person who trades my cars every 2 or 3 years, why would I want to get an 8-year loan? Because that's going to guarantee negative equity when it's time to trade it in. So, you know, Omvic's position has never been, no one should have an 8-year loan. It might make sense for some people, but for many it doesn't. And you really, really need to do some research, understand the potential ramifications of that extended term loan.
And also the amount financed.
Yes.
Okay? When you finance most things outside of the auto business, you could only finance up to a certain percentage, usually 100%. A number of auto loans exceed 100%, 130, sometimes up to 170%. Could you imagine, you know, financing your house twice the value of your house?
That's legal. That's the scary part.
We actually
totally
have
legal.
a document from one of the big 5 banks back at the Omvic offices where they have told dealers they will finance up to 170% of the value of the vehicle.
I remember you told me that for a piece I was writing. I'm like, what? Now, we only have about 30 seconds, but that negative equity amount, does that show on a bill of contract, on a sales contract
It
for a
should.
new car?
It should. Historically, it would get hidden. It would get rolled in. They would inflate the cost of some options. No, I'd inflate the cost of the car, and then inflate the value of the trade-in. That's completely offside, and Omvic has issued 2 bulletins to dealers in 2017 explaining that while negative equity is perfectly legal, it has to be clearly and accurately reflected on the bill of sale so that consumers understand exactly what is going on with this transaction.
So it has to show. Terry, thank you so much for coming in. It's been great talking to you. We'll be back with Ask the Mechanic after this break. Lemonade Car Show. Welcome back to the Lemonade Car Show. I'm your host, Lorraine Sommerfeld. Now, one of the most popular parts of our show, Ask a Mechanic. I'm joined by Chris Muir, our mechanic. He's a professor at Centennial College, and John Raymond with the APA. Let's go right to the phones.
Why not?
Good morning. I've been watching your Lemonade show, and my son-in-law has bought a 2017 Ford Fusion Hybrid. Bought it, took possession the 23rd of May. And of the 150 plus days that he has owned it, the shop has had it 10 times for almost 70 days.
Oh.
So this is an easy one to approach, but it's a little bit time consuming. Essentially, it is a new vehicle. According to her, it's been in 10 times. She, or actually her son-in-law, needs to contact Ford Customer Care, say what gives, this is a brand new car, get a ticket number, and then they should go on to a website called CAMVAP, CAMVAP.ca, and it's an arbitration program in Canada for vehicle owners. This vehicle qualifies that have recurring problems, and it will lead either to the problem being corrected at a more senior level or potential buyback of the vehicle.
The other thing I just want to delineate is she said it has been held back there 70 days. That's the key point here. A car being in 10 times, if it's only in for a software tweak or something, those 10 times, it might not be as unreasonable as that 70 days. So that's
correct.
The part
And
that's
they will have to
limiting
look at the files,
Yeah.
look at the natures of the problems.
Yeah.
But I would say, given what she says, it's definitely worth going through the process and
Sounds like they're not
determine.
being able to duplicate something if they're hanging
Not
on to
being
it,
able to
doing so, yeah.
duplicate, or it's an intermittent concern. They duplicate it, they try something, it doesn't do it while it's there, and send it away.
Hope that helps. Okay, let's bounce to the next call.
My question is, how do I find out whether my vehicle has the correct mileage on it? I bought a vehicle 2016, but I suspect there's more mileage on it than what the odometer reads. And I would like very much to get an answer to that, how I would find that out. Thank you. My name is Victor.
There's a few different ways you can go about that. First off, every time it's registered, it should have the mileage registered with it. So you can go back to whichever province you registered it with and ask to see the history report of the vehicle. Here in Ontario, it's about $20, and it will have each mileage it had when it was registered year over year. You can go back with the software in a factory scan tool and check out which module contains the mileage, provided that hasn't been tampered with. And then you can go find the service records of the vehicle.
It's also easier to turn back odometers now than it used to be, correct?
Yes, you can hack them with software.
So we went from it being difficult to now it can
It's
be a legitimate
never been
concern.
really difficult. We went from
horrible
mechanical.
Yeah.
We went from mechanical, which was very easy to turn back. We opened
Yeah.
up the back, and I could do it sitting here. We went into this kind of intermittent phase where people didn't have the technology readily available to turn them back. Now our personal technology has caught up to that, and it's very easy to write a program.
They have to
turn
go
them back.
and, as Chris said, they have to go check service records, check the Services Ontario in Ontario. Ontario actually asks for the mileage each time you re-register your car.
Yep.
Certain jurisdictions and provinces don't. But there is a way to find, is it a perfect system? No. But with a little bit of digging,
can find it.
they
Okay.
will be able to find out what the mileage is on
Find
the
out
car.
where it's been.
And something so recent will have warranty information stored with the manufacturer as well.
Okay, and if it had been a rental or in a fleet, that would have to be disclosed on a car proof, correct?
And
Okay.
at time of purchase.
Okay.
In most provinces, they say they have to tell you that it's a taxi or a private or something else.
So it might cost you $20 to start digging, but you should be able to get a little bit more information on your vehicle. Let's go to the next call.
Yes, hi. I was just wondering, I'm just looking around for a Toyota Sienna minivan, and I'm just wondering what price I would be paying for one. I'm looking possibly at buying a 2013, the SE model, with under 100,000 kilometers. So I'm just wondering what I'd be looking at paying for a vehicle like that, whether it's private or at the dealer. Thank you very much.
We're not going to give them a magic number, but we are going to tell them the
Well, there are
things that
various
factor into
sources.
this.
There are various sources. Obviously, you could hit the pavement and look at what they're being sold in your neighborhood or a little bit further from home. You could do that in your pajamas at home on the internet.
Yeah.
And generally, if you see a price on the internet or at a dealership's lot or a private individual, that's the asking price. Then there's a negotiated price. Doesn't necessarily mean that they will sell at the price that you want it, because in this case, Sienna 2013 is a much sought after vehicle.
Yes.
They hold their resale value. I would say, look in those places, but this is very much driven by market conditions, this particular vehicle, and the sellers definitely have the upper hand.
That's where somewhere like Auto Trader is really good, because you can see a ballpark literally full of Siennas and say, okay, this condition, this mileage, they're going to be within a couple thousand of each other, and then you can start narrowing
Absolutely.
it down from there. So I would look at a whole bunch and then narrow it down. We'll be back after this break with more Lemonade and more of your calls. Welcome back to the Lemonade Car Show. I'm your host, Lorraine Sommerfeld. I'm joined now by Chris Muir and John Raymond, and we're taking calls.
Yeah, speak to the flood cars that are coming up from down south, from the states that have a lot of flood issues. How do you protect yourself against a flood car?
Good question. I've
This
written
has
about
been
this.
a
Yeah.
big issue actually in Western Canada for Western Canadian listeners, that cars have come up from California or Southwest
Harvey,
U.S. Not so much in Eastern Canada. How could you find out? You could ask for a Carfax, which is the U.S. thing. Usually that information is transferred to CarProof in Canada. There are telltale signs, watermarks, things like that Chris could talk to you about.
Yeah. There's some pretty big tells if the car has been seriously damaged. Water staining is a big one in behind panels. That's stuff that you won't see. If the interior's been completely refreshed and it still smells kind of musty inside, that's kind of a real question there. Anytime you're buying something from the States, you want to know what state it came from, what the history of it has been. And usually it's not such a great deal. Buying a domestic car is usually the safer choice. It's been in the country, it's already registered. The odometer is, it doesn't have to be transferred from mileage to kilometers. Right? It doesn't make a whole bunch of sense to buy something from the South. If it's a sweetheart deal, there's something wrong.
And I'll caution you even further, not only could mileage be rolled back, but in the U.S. when U.S. manufacturers buy back lemon law cars, depending on the state, those go to auction and are resold, and often those cars come up to Canada. So you could be buying somebody else's profound problem.
Yeah. And there are a couple states where they can wash the titles, like they're known for being so lax that it can come through with the paperwork altered. So yeah, you're right. Just buy a car from around here, but musty. And if you look behind the headlights, you'll see corrosion starting because it happens in 10 minutes. So I hope that helps you. Stay away from flood cars if you can.
My name is Gary. I asked a question about a 2017 Lexus 200T. I just leasing it right at the moment. I'm just wondering if it's a car I should be leasing and buying out afterwards, or if there's any problems with it that they know of.
Okay, so this Lexus that he's talking about, it could be one of three Lexuses. It could be an IS 200 that's just been rebadged to 300. It could be a CT 200 hybrid, or it could be an NX. So we really don't know which vehicle it is. Generally, they've been reliable. He already owns it. So
he's leasing it.
Oh, well, yeah.
So actually,
So it could be a Lexus 200H wagon as well.
Could be.
Yeah.
none of that matters actually to the question. We're talking about when you're leasing a car, should I buy it at the end of the lease? And this is becoming increasing. A lot of people are leasing because it's cheaper monthly out of the gate. So this is increasingly becoming a more popular question. You know what I tell people? Do you love it? And if they say, well, yeah, is it reliable? Yeah, I really like it. So the car you know is often worth financing and taking out a loan and buying it.
And also look at the end value. If at the end of the lease term that they say you could buy this car for $25,000 plus taxes, but ones are being sold in the open market, whether on a Auto Trader or at other dealers' lots for $20,000 with less kilometers.
You can hand the keys back.
You know,
and
maybe
start
there's
again.
hand the keys back, but generally the advice that you just mentioned is very good.
As far as the mechanical quality of the car, it's a Toyota hybrid underneath the Lexus badging. It's a really, really fancy, well-known hybrid car. They use them as million-mile taxi cabs in the Prius form. The powertrain will keep going on this car, barring any unforeseen circumstance.
So by all means, if you like it, buy it. What's our next question?
Hi. I was just looking at a vehicle to purchase. It's a minivan. It's a 2013 Chrysler Town & Country, the limited edition, so it has all the available options like the leather interior and the sunroof and power doors, everything. And this is a one-owner vehicle, owned by one gentleman only, and I would be the second owner. I went to see it. Everything is working. All the electrical features are working on it. It's in pristine condition. Never been abused, only used on for the highway, and it has 176,000 kilometers on it. And it's just had all new brakes and rotors and rear shocks and well maintained. You'll be selling it certified, so it's all ready to go. So I'm just wondering if $12,000 out the door is a good price for this vehicle. I would appreciate your input on that. Thanks.
Well, I'm not going to speak to the price. It's not something that I regularly price out. But the vehicle itself, They're not a horrible van. They're pretty much the only one on the market right now from a domestic standpoint. The brakes wear out relatively quickly on these ones. They had a couple of EGR issues with them, a couple of transmission issues, but all in all, they've seemed to be a fairly reliable van.
It's a lot of mileage, 170 plus thousand kilometers in
But in
4
5 years, I believe the highway story actually.
Mm-hmm.
And those things, you can pile miles on those if you don't mind them eating the brakes.
Yes.
And what could you buy that size with that equipment for 12 grand?
Yeah, it sounds nice. Actually, you know, if you don't want to buy it, I'll buy it. This is like a good little workhorse.
Depends on the color. Remember, they did come in
Depends
orange.
on the color. Yeah, that's right. I had an 84 one of these, one of the original
And that's our
caravans.
expert over here.
So
Yeah.
he's been
Red
making
better?
bad choices all along.
I've not been making bad choices all along, except putting you on the show, maybe.
He seems to know he seems to know the car, so
Yeah.
maybe you should buy
You know,
it.
I would still want my own mechanic to take a
Yeah,
boo at it,
absolutely.
but you know where it's coming from, which is good, and actually 12,000 for that. Those, when you get a good one, if you can put up with the brake thing, I think
Well, those
they're
have
good.
been changed, right?
Yeah.
Quite a bit of work
So
has
he's
been
starting
done.
out fresh. Yeah, you know, I think that's good. That's all the time for Lemonade. I'd like to thank my sponsors, Omvic and Crown, and Chris Muir and John Raymond, and we'll see you next time.